Well, hi, and welcome to SPED Homeschool Conversations. Thank you for joining us tonight on our Facebook Live broadcast. And for those of you who are watching on our recorded version of this session, both on Facebook, YouTube, and also on our podcast. Our special guest tonight is Beverly Burgess, and I hope I said that right.
Burgess, but that's okay.
All right.
That's all right.
I'm going to read her bio to you because it is fascinating. She calls herself an educational disruptor and is a homeschool coach with more than a decade of homeschooling experience, and she's helped hundreds of families see that learning isn't about desks lined up in a classroom. Amen to that. She's been featured in magazine articles and podcasts as the executive director of a large nonprofit homeschooling group for over 7 years and as a columnist at Homeschool Life magazine. Bev has been a keynote speaker at Homeschooling Through High School and Introduction to Homeschooling workshops for the public, and is a fervent advocate for homeschooling rights. And her book, Out of the Box Learning, Empowering You on Your Homeschool Journey, is both a memoir of her oldest child's journey through special education and a complete how-to guide for homeschoolers. Bev coaches new and seasoned homeschoolers through all stages of home education and is an admitted curriculum hoarder.
I am.
Yeah. In her pre-homeschooling life, Bev was a registered nurse and held an advanced certification in neurosurgical intensive care nursing, advanced cardiac life support, and critical care nursing, and spent almost 20 years working in a neurosurgical intensive care unit in a big city hospital. She has contributed to national studies on Tourette syndrome and ran a large adoption support group in Rhode Island, as well as having served as chairperson for a $2 million capital campaign for a building initiative. She and her husband of 26 years and their 3 children, ages 14, 18, and 21, live in Rhode Island with an array of animals and a big organic vegetable garden. And her oldest graduated from college in writing an English major, and her middle is United States Marine, and her 14-year-old is still being homeschooled through high school at her homeschool. So welcome, Beverly.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here with you all tonight.
Yes, we're excited to have you too, and that you agreed to talk with us on should I homeschool my child with special needs? Because at this time of year, there's a lot of parents sitting on the fence and looking at, the one option and the other option and going, which is the best option for me?
Yes.
And we both have very similar backgrounds as to why we started homeschooling, and it's for this exact reason. And I think, you're probably 16 years in and have a lot of experience, and you can probably answer just about every question these parents have, and I'm excited for you to be able to share from that experience. And so I thought I would just start out with having you share a bit of your story, because you've sat on both sides of that fence, and just your background and what made that decision, and why you kept going.
Yeah.
I hear that.
Yes, we actually do have a very similar story. My oldest child, Patrick, was diagnosed with Tourette syndrome when he was 6 years old. We knew before that, but they won't give a formal diagnosis till he was 6. Mm-hmm. And being a neurosurgical nurse, I thought I had a great handle on this, and I'm going to be able to, tackle this, and we're going to sail through this with no problem. And then the rug was pulled out under us. And we had tried probably for 4 years to work with the public school system to get him the services he needed. We worked on his IEP, and he just was not progressing, the way that we knew he could. He was such a brilliant child, but they tested him and he keeps coming back and they're saying, no, he's got all these deficits and he's lacking in this area and he can't do this and he can't do that thing. And we were seeing something completely different at home. We knew, how brilliant he was. Not brilliant, but, every parent thinks their child is brilliant. But
better than he was doing at school, I'm sure.
Yeah. So it just came to a point where he was absolutely miserable in school and coming home crying every single day and stressed out and getting, the red marks on all of his papers. There was nothing that celebrated his gifts or the things that he could do. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, we had an IEP meeting, and my husband and I left that meeting, and I stood in the parking lot of the school, absolutely sobbing, leaning on the back of the car, because it was just horrible. And I just looked at my husband, and I was having chest pain, like real chest pain. And I said to him, I said, we have to do something different. There's got to be something different and something better for our child, because this isn't it. This is not working on any level at all. And a couple of weeks had gone by, and I finally said to him, I had done a little bit of research on homeschooling, actually private school first, because I'm like, there's no way that I could possibly homeschool. There's no way. I have to be crazy to think about homeschooling a child, any child, not just a special needs child, but any child. Who would do that? And I finally said to my husband, we can't afford private school. We have to homeschool him. And he looked at me and goes, what? Because you have to be insane. No. I said, no, that's what we're doing. And, you know, long story short, we sent in our paperwork, and I said I was homeschooling him. I had no idea how I was going to do it, had no idea where to begin. And we kind of just jumped off the cliff, and, you know, 16 years later, here we are. So,
you never scrambled back up that cliff again.
I tried a few times. By my fingertips. I tried a few times, but it wouldn't let me back up. It was too steep. So, but yeah, so that's pretty much it in a nutshell. So,
you know, there's some reactions, you know, the cry, you know, as well as I do, of being, you know, having worked with parents on the other end of the phone, that desperation is so common, especially when we have children that just can't seem to fit in or find the services that they need to learn, or have an environment in a school that is conducive to them being able to take in information. And parents just are at their wits' end with what to do. And you know, homeschooling isn't a very viable option. And so we're going to go through some typical questions, I guess, you know, homeschooling and special needs, but we also want our viewers to know that they can throw in their questions while we're going along, and we will throw them up too. And we'd love to send them to Beverly so she can answer those as we're going along. And so definitely feel like this is an interactive thing. And so Jill had said, she goes, I think we're all
we all think that at first.
Exactly. That we just can't do it.
Yes.
But yeah, we're crazy.
We're crazy. And there's no way around that. You're going to be crazy no matter what you do. So yes, absolutely.
I always say, why be normal? Because it's kind of just, there is no normal anyways. And why try to strive for the middle ground when you can do so much better?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So
yeah.
Yes. Perfect.
So I guess the first question is, you know, can I do it? And how would you answer that, Karen, or how do you?
You know, I think I have kind of two tracks for parents. One is, yes, you can do it, but there's also some pitfalls to look for, and I'll go over those in just a second. But you know, as a special needs parent, you absolutely can homeschool your child. I think we get in the mindset that you know, public school kind of teaches us that if we decide to homeschool our children, they're going to be lacking in some area, or that they won't achieve. And I think that's very much embedded in us. You know, even 16 years into homeschooling, you know, you still have those thoughts that cross your head, or that cross your brain. But you absolutely can homeschool your children. And the other piece about public school is, I think public school teaches to the limit of the diagnosis, where homeschooling teaches to the strengths of the child. From what I
point.
saw in public school, they really only do teach to the limits of the diagnosis. And that's something I think as homeschoolers that we excel at, that because we can really teach to the strengths of the child and customize an education plan for them. Yeah. And it's, go ahead.
Yeah, so explain to me, like, for your student, what was that customization that you were able to do for your child?
It took me quite a while to find that out. It was probably a year into homeschooling, and I'll talk about that a little bit later as well. But it was probably a good year to find out how and what worked for him. And it was a matter of trial and error that he was so damaged from what had happened in public school. Just as an example, when he came home, as far as math was concerned, he could only do 2 math problems, not 2 pages, 2 problems. And this was in 4th grade when we pulled him out. And it wasn't that he didn't understand the concept, but it was a problem with sequencing the steps and getting them all down and figuring them out, and being told he had to memorize things, which he couldn't do. Right. There was no way. He had no short-term memory at all. So there was no way for him to do that. So it really was a matter of trial and error, and as we got into homeschooling, we found out he had some dyslexia, he had some visual disorders as well. So it started out with just us trying things and figuring out what worked, like highlighting addition and subtraction signs different colors. The addition sign was blue and the subtraction sign was yellow. Right, because what he would do is he could not tell the difference between an addition sign and a multiplication sign because they looked exactly the same to him. Right. So, of course, he was getting all of his math problems wrong. It wasn't that he didn't understand the concept of the math, but when you can't tell what the operational sign is, you're going to get the problem wrong. So by highlighting the signs a different color, and we stuck with that for years on end, the blue and the pink or whatever colors we chose, it kind of became embedded in his brain that, okay, I know blue is multiplication and pink is addition. So very much those types of things that we had to use as crutches to get over those initial learning humps. So, yeah.
That's great because and each child is different. And I think parents get so stuck in that, well, these teachers are trained, they're professionals. Right. But the real reality of it is the teachers do the same things in the classroom. They do trial and error to try to figure out, but yet they have 20, 30 kids that they're doing this with all at the same time. Right. And you have one. Yes. And you can do this. Yes. Just one.
Yes. Yeah. And there's far fewer distractions in homeschooling. Point being, there's not 30 other students in the class. You're working one-on-one with your student, and that's a proven method through the years. It's essentially you are tutoring your child. It's one-on-one to get them to where they need to be. They're not lining up to go to the bathroom or to go to gym class or, everybody get your lunch, waiting for people to turn to page 32 in their science book. There's not all of those extra distractions that you find in the classroom, which really helps them focus on what's in front of them.
I when you started, talking about this, it's those doubts. We have so many doubts of ourselves and doubts of our children being able to push past these struggles. Right. And, there's so much freedom to work around those that schools don't have. And, that's what I was hearing you say as, you were talking about this, is you can do it because you can do it at the time and your child. Yes. Yes, definitely. Yes, you absolutely know your child. And that's an incredible point that I make with a lot of my clients, is the fact that we know our children. We know their moods, we know their idiosyncrasies, we know their quirks, we know when they're tired, when they need a break, how they learn, and we'll sit and learn right along with them
and be able to focus on them more. But yeah, we know our child far better than any other person really, on this earth. So very valid point.
Yeah.
Very valid point.
We have one comment here that just says, yes, we accomplish so much more when it's one-on-one.
Yes.
Yeah, so true. Yeah.
It's very true. I think for any child, not even special needs child, but any child, it's just a superior way to learn anything. So yeah, absolutely.
Well, and you can catch the errors right away too. That was one thing that I found, when kids learn, especially math, and that's my area of expertise. But to do a whole workbook page wrong, to correct that takes weeks.
Yes.
When you're sitting next to your child and they do one wrong and you go, oh, I think we should change this and how we should work around it. Right. And, then they don't keep repeating. Oh, I'm sorry. My phone is ringing. It was your dog before, now it's my phone. Anyways, we'll ignore that.
3, 8, 5, 6, 0, 0.
So, but yeah,
all from 1, 5,
just a second.
4, 0, 3, 8.
Okay. I apologize for that. Oh, well, we got someone here that made a comment. She said, I love being free to adapt to my son's learning. Since he struggles with writing, I can control how much writing he has to do, use other strategies to demonstrate comprehension, and we can customize our learning to his interests when I find something that sparks.
Yeah. That's awesome, Emily. Absolutely. It's just one of the huge benefits of homeschooling. And I'm so glad you figured that piece of it out. So yeah, perfect.
Yeah. And that interest-based too is such a key thing.
It is. I have a lot of, I want to flip it just to the other side for a minute. While you can homeschool your child, I do have so many clients that come to me struggling, because there are a few things that I see, with special needs parents, is that if they're pulling their child out of public school, they try to fix everything that went wrong immediately. I think there's a sense that we want to prove, not necessarily the public school wrong, but that we can do this.
Right.
And we try to fix all of the things that our child hasn't learned or where their deficits may be, and we want them fixed quickly. Yeah. And we're going to do whatever we can to get that done. And it just does not happen that way. It can be years before even minimal progress is seen, depending on the environment that your child was in, depending on how they learn, depending on their diagnosis. There's a whole multitude of layers that have to be looked at. So it can be years before you see progress with your child. And I'll go back to my oldest and use math as an example. It was almost 2 years before we saw significant progress in math. And there's days that you feel like you're beating your head against the wall, like, why? Why and how am I doing this? Like, we're not getting anywhere. How does this happen? And then,
exactly.
And then I have a flip side of parents who have children with pretty profound medical needs, where the medical needs and the doctor's appointments will take up, a good portion of their day. Exactly. And they're getting home saying, how am I ever going to squeeze in homeschooling? We've been at the doctor's for 12 hours today doing testing and everything else. And it just results in burnout. Because they feel like they can't get everything in. It leaves little time for everything else. Right. They always feel like that they're not doing enough for their child. So those are just some things to be aware of and to take into consideration.
Right. But, like for those parents, the thing that they need to understand is that there are seasons.
Yes.
when medical things are necessary. And whether they were in a public school or not, they were still getting more education in the car with you.
Yes.
When you talk to them, when you're just having general family time and discussions, than if you were trying to even rush them to school or to shove things down, into
Right.
them that the school said that they had to learn that week, and they would just be more frustrated. It's that piece that's in your home that's going to allow even general learning to happen over time.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All good.
We had a comment here. It says, I drove my daughter crazy. I pushed her too hard. It actually hurt her self-esteem. It took months to figure out what I was doing to her. I think we all do that.
Yes.
We have that pressure that something's got to give. We got to go, and this child just has to. I always get that call. How do I get my child caught up? And I'm like, caught up to what?
Right.
I've learned now that that's not a good question to ask. But, I was in that same boat when we got started. And my oldest, I know I pushed him. And I tell people, the most I got that child to write in high school was an email to me.
Yes. Yes.
And for some reason, in college, he got A's in English and wrote papers. Something clicked, I guess.
Exactly. Yes, it absolutely does click though, because it's so true, because my oldest that we pulled out of public school, who would not write 2 sentences in public school, just graduated from college as an English and writing major. So
exactly.
It does. At some point, there's something that clicks in their brain and they get it. And all of those things that we worry about work themselves out in whatever way it needs to work itself out. It just does. It's a miraculous thing.
Exactly.
To watch. If I have one graduate from college, I sit here and go, who'd have thunk?
I guess I did something right.
I did something right. Exactly. Yeah. It's so funny. It is. It's funny to watch it. So, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes. Good.
So,
yes. And I think it's important, too, for parents to remember to be gentle with yourselves.
Yes.
As much as we try to provide for our kids and give them their good education, and we have good parenting skills, we have to remember that homeschooling is new for us as well, and it's new, especially if you're taking on the education of a child with special needs, and we are learning right along with them. So, you're going to have those setbacks where you push them too hard, and times where you're going to coddle them too much. Yeah. At the end of the day, it all comes out in the wash, and, you just have to you have to look at your own heart and realize you're doing the best you can. You're finding your way as your child finds your way too. So,
yeah. And that's such a great benefit too of homeschooling, is I've seen my own character, and just even what I never learned in school, I've now learned homeschooling.
Yes.
Which is great, because I hated history and now I absolutely love it.
I was the exact same way. That's so funny. That's so funny. Yeah. Like memorizing dates, the wars and all of that stuff. I was just like, ugh. Who can bother? And then I'm like, oh no, now I have to teach my children this stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Stuff that I don't like. And it was just so different. We found different ways to do that. And yeah, I think as I became older, learning became so much more enjoyable than it was kind of the first time around when I was in school. That time I did it because I had to, and now it really was for pleasure and figuring out, what interests all of us that we can pursue. So, yeah, great.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I got a question here that I'm in, and it says, what would be the best approach to reading and writing if my daughter is behind? I guess I'm going to have to ask behind in what, and what age or grade level is she at? If you have any other questions to add to that, Beverly, before you can give an adequate answer.
No, those would be the questions I'd ask too. And I do have some ideas, when we hear from her, Serena, if you...
if you just want to type in and let us know, and then we'll
yeah, we can see what we can do for you. Yeah,
definitely.
I know.
So yeah, but like by those historical fiction just really opened my eyes to if you're listening to this and you've never approached history with historical fiction, it just changes the world, because you relate to the people of that time period all of a sudden, instead of just memorizing those dates like you were talking about. And I'd have my kids even act out the books, because that, then it became really real. I mean, they're going, why were they picking up guns off of dead soldiers? And, because they're bending over and, going, oh, that's why.
Yeah.
So, but it makes them ask questions, because sometimes they can even tune you out too. So if you have kids with ADHD, that's
yeah. We found a lot of enjoyment kind of researching our family tree and doing the genealogy part of it, because then we could relate it back to the Civil War, the Revolutionary War, and get a real feel for what that time period was like, kind of through our ancestors. So that for that history piece of it was kind of the turning point for me. And I was like, hey, I really do like history now. But
well, it becomes so personal then too.
Yes.
That's great.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Serena said that she has a 10-year-old at a first grade level in reading and writing.
Okay. Honestly, Serena, I wouldn't worry too much about that right now. She's behind by public school standards, but probably not by her standards. I think the best thing we can do as homeschoolers, it doesn't matter where she is. You have to start where she is. There's no way around it. Whether she's kind of at the first grade level or the second grade level, you have to start where she is and move on from that point. Some of the things you can try, I'm not sure, what the issues are with the reading and writing, but if she's reluctant for that, some of the things you can try are audio books. Are a spectacular way to get kids to learn. You can listen to them in the car, while you're waiting for the for dance class to start. Audiobooks are great. A lot of things that I recommend to parents are also, if she does watch TV, if that's something you allow in your home, is to turn on the closed caption for the TV. Because just exposing the kids to those words on the TV will help their reading. Now, when it comes to writing, I take a different approach to writing. I don't push kids with their writing, because I honestly don't feel that kids are ready for formalized writing until their later years. I probably start much later than any other homeschool parent. So you could just let her do free writing and see if that's going to help her. You can have her dictate stories to you, and have you write them down in her journal, create a story that way as well. And there's some online programs as well where kids can kind of create their own story. And the last thing I'm going to recommend for you is, oh God, I wish I could remember the name of it, but it's something, Dragon something. It's a speech to text application. I will find out and get back to you.
Know of it,
the viewers right now. It's not Dragon Text. Oh my gosh, I can't remember the name of it. But it's a speech to text, so she can literally speak into the microphone and it will type for her on the screen. So if that's something she struggles with, that may be a bit of a relief for her, so that she can actually see the content of what she's writing onto the screen. So yeah, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Peggy.
Well, the audiobooks was something. My oldest didn't learn to read until he was in 4th grade, and he was reading at college level the next year. My goal was not to get my child to a grade level. My goal was to have my child love literature.
Yes.
And so if I kept my focus on that goal instead of the measurables, then that goal was always being achieved through other means, and it wasn't frustrating my child. So, yeah, that's that brings us to a question that you had. What can I do if my child is not progressing? And
I think there's a couple of things. I think first is not to be afraid to call on professional help if you need it. You know, I think sometimes as parents, especially homeschooling parents, we kind of get stuck in the, well, I'm doing this, I need to do it by myself, we're going to make it happen. But absolutely call on professionals if you need to, whether it's, you know, a physical therapist, an occupational therapist, or any kind of therapist to help your child. You can call on tutors as well. If you are really stuck on a subject that you're trying to teach, calling a tutor is a great way, because they will also teach you different methods and different ways to help you reach your child. So the tutor's not just for you. And sometimes just sitting by watching somebody else teach your child gives you a new insight into how they learn and a different way of approaching it. So absolutely call on professionals if you need to. And I think the one piece of advice that I would say for kids with special needs is that these children need much more time and much more repetition to process information that's in front of them. So a lot of times it's just a matter of giving them more time to let them blossom and to figure out where they need to be. And public school just doesn't allow for that time. They have their set time for subjects. They have to move on to the next thing. But in homeschooling, we can take as long as it needs. You know, so if learning long division takes, you know, it's supposed to take 6 days and it takes 6 weeks, that's what it takes. And you can't move on until they've mastered it, and it's just the way it is. But learning ebbs and flows. So they may be stuck on one concept at one time and sail right through the next 3 concepts you're trying to teach. So it very much is, it's a balancing act. And I think the last, go ahead, Peggy. Did you want to say something?
Well, I was just going to say that too. Sometimes if you have like one area, especially in math, this works well, is that just grab another resource that teaches that same concept from a different direction.
Yes.
Because not always is the book that you're using will be able to approach it from a way that your child understands that concept. And math is one of those that you can approach from like 5 different directions.
Yes.
And once you get the right direction, then your child can conquer it. And so, and it's not wasting time. Because if they don't get that and you move on, you're creating bigger problems down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too that, you know, you can back off any of the curriculums for a little bit or find a different way to teach it. So if your child, you know, is trying to do a book report and struggling with the written part of it, you know, have them do an oral report, or, you know, maybe do it in the form of a debate with somebody else in the family or another homeschooling friend. Find a different way to get them to do what you need them to do without, if they're stuck on that one area. So
yeah, and those are some good skills too for, you know, adulting. They need to know how to do PowerPoints. They need to know how to do a visual presentation, how to, you know, put slides together for things, and that can be a book report also. Right.
Yeah, lots of different ways to make that happen for all different learning styles for kids. So excellent points.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So Serena said, thank you so much. And she knows the program. So
great.
She didn't share it, but she knows it. And then someone else had recommended to her to use Learning Ally or audible.com. That's their child.
Yes.
I love those.
Great.
Definitely, those are good ones. So are we ready for another question? We have one from Emily Grace here. And she asked, do you have any resources to help with reading comprehension? My kids can read. It's just having them tell me what they just read is very difficult and anxiety producing for them.
I don't know that I have any direct resources for that, but I think one of the things that you can do, Emily, is just to break it down into smaller chunks. And sometimes for kids, that means, 2 sentences at a time rather than 2 pages, which may be overwhelming. And I would ask them very specific questions about the reading, not not the, well, what did you think? Type things, because they get so overwhelmed with that. You can direct your questions toward the characters, the settings, what conflict they had. I would just encourage you to be very, very specific with the questions you ask, and then broaden out from that point. And that may take a little bit of time to get to, especially with younger kids. They can't think on the broader, not all of them, but obviously some of them, have a lot of difficulty with the abstract pieces of it. They look for the concrete things that happened in the book. He went up the hill, he got a pail of water. They can't do metaphors. They can't do kind of those abstract thoughts. Right. So just be very specific in your questions when you start out. And I don't know if anybody else has specific resources for comprehension.
Yeah. Well, I've learned too that some of the resources that I use for comprehension, they were written in a way that we don't communicate at home. And so my children found them very confusing. And so I made up my own questions because that's the way we talked in our house. Yeah. It was much easier for them to understand what the question was. My goal was to eventually get them to that point, because if they're taking like a test where they have to understand how the tester is wanting the question answered, they have to get to that point. But when they first start out, don't start out confusing them with the questions as well as the process of answering comprehension questions. Yes, it's too overwhelming and too much for them. It has to be broken down into much more manageable bites for them. Right. So, yeah. So great. Hopefully that helps, Emily. Good. So, yeah. So I guess we've probably, is public school a better choice for my child? I think we've covered that, unless you have any more to say on that. No, not too much. I think, we've covered most of that. I think it really depends on the family. I've seen and what your goals are for your child as well. I've seen some families thrive and do very well in public school, and others that I'm like, please pull your child out. This isn't, this isn't working. So I think it's very much an individual, individual decision that it just needs to be given good thought. It's not for every family. I agree. Right. I have a friend who's a special ed teacher, and her son is in the special ed program. It works well for her and their family, and for him. But we're having ice cream one night, and she said to me, Peggy, there's a family that so badly needs to homeschool their child. All he does all day is bang his head against the wall. And, you just feel for her, and, she knows this is a better solution for this family. And they just weren't willing to listen. They just wanted to keep him there. And that's kind of, unfortunately, very sad that our schools have that many things that they're dealing with. So, yeah. So you have one question here. How do I make my days go smoother? Because let's be real, they aren't all good. They're not all good. It's not all rainbows and ponies. And I think not just for special needs parents, even exactly. Even as a homeschool mom and trying to manage it all, there are days that you are pulling your hair out. But, I special needs moms, my heart goes out to them, because I know that on the difficult days, it can be really difficult. And it can be so difficult if you don't have a support system in place. And if you don't have anybody to turn to just kind of release all of those feelings that you're having about your child and their learning. And I'm going to be very honest here. There are days that we do not like our children. We will always love them, but there are days that we do not like our children. And those are the really hard days, because the mom guilt kicks in, and you feel like you should. But
It's just hard. I think you have to celebrate the small wins, because as a special needs mom or parent or whoever you are, there's days that it seems like you're not winning. Yeah. That you're not making it over that hump, that nothing's progressing, you're not making any headway at all. You have to celebrate the small wins. And the small wins may be, yesterday he did 2 math problems, today he did 3 math problems, and we didn't cry about it. Exactly. That's a win. That's an absolute win in my book. And, other people may look at that and go, that's nothing, but you have to hold on to those moments where you are making some progress with your kids.
Exactly. Yeah. Our support group on Facebook, we have a SPED Homeschool support group, and we have celebration Fridays every once in a while. And those are the celebrations we hear, because that's where we're all at.
Yes.
And everybody's always happy for everyone else because they know what an accomplishment that can be.
Yes, absolutely.
So it's good to have people around you that get it.
Yes, and I think it's important too is finding other parents who have experienced what you have and what you're going through. And if you are able to find somebody, just to give you a little break with respite care, meaning, if you can drop your child off at a homeschooling friend's house for a couple hours just to give you a break, and switch that off once in a while so that, you could go get your nails done or just do grocery shopping without kids in tow or something along those lines. Try to find whatever outlets you can where you will give yourself a bit of a breather, a bit of a break to decompress from everything that, we carry on our shoulders. It's a lot. It's an
anxiety. It piles on top of each other, and you forget how much you have built up that you need to just release. And whether it's, for different people, it's different things. Some people need alone time. Some people need to be out with friends, and, figure out what that thing is and make it a priority. Definitely. You just can't keep being the sacrifice, that gets laid down every time, and you just weren't meant to do that.
Right.
You gotta have people and support around you, definitely.
Yeah. And I think too, I would say, look for the educational materials that are going to be simple for you to teach. Scale back as much as you can. They don't need to do all 30 problems on the math page. If they're mastering it in 10, that's enough for them. To be able to do that, just cut out the busy work, cut out all of the extra stuff, and just whittle it back down to basics, which relieves quite a bit of pressure on the parent and on the child as well, because you're just not trying to cram all of that in, into a day. So. Right.
Yeah. And I think we tend to think we're going to do public school at home, which I know you probably would not recommend.
No. I do not recommend that.
Because it's trying to keep that schedule, and I know even some programs that are like online are very similar to those types of things. And we if you get a curriculum like that, that can run your life. So make sure what you pick and choose doesn't do that to you. Yeah. That it gives you those outs and gives you that ability as a parent to make those choices for your child.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's one of the biggest struggles I have with a lot of my clients, is the fact that, they're, at least in the beginning, and I think it's something we all did as new homeschooling parents, is trying to replicate public school at home, and it just doesn't work. And for parents to remember, well, we pulled our child out of that environment because we wanted something different for them. So let's create that something different. It doesn't need to look like public school at all. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, on our self-care, Emily had said it's so important. As an introvert, it's hard because I'm hardly ever alone since the kids are always at home. I can't, I'm glad I'm not an introvert. I think I probably would have curled up in a ball with all my kids around me. But she said her husband has agreed once a week to have mom away time. And that's great. Yeah, to have somebody. And if you're not married, find a friend that you can at least trade off time with. You know, it's you got to have that time for yourself. So Serena had one more question. She said, "What are good homeschool programs for my daughter can attend?" That's a hard one. Depends on where you are. And I'm not familiar with the one she's talking about. Acellus,
yeah. Serena, I think as Peggy said, that's probably a hard question to answer because every state has different requirements for what you have to complete. And then there's also the options of what you would like to do with your children as well. You can look into, I don't know if you're looking for something outside of the online program or exactly what you're looking for, but you could look in your area and see if there's any homeschool groups that you can hook up with, because they often have, discounts to field trips, discounts on classes. They'll have resources for, teaching kind of the extracurricular stuff, or even things like algebra, all kinds of things that you can join in. They'll have discounts to shopping, craft stores, business stores, things along those lines. You could try your local libraries. A lot of them will have groups, either craft nights or teen nights or those types of things. YMCA, gym classes, all kinds of craft classes, karate. There's so many things out in the community now that you can, try to get your daughter to and see if any of those work for you. I'm not sure if that's what you were looking for, but start there and see if any of those work.
Yeah, it's hard for kids when they're struggling to be put into a classroom situation. So especially in those subjects that your daughter struggles in, try to do those one-on-one. They are going to be so much better of an effect in teaching. But it's a good point that, we forget about those extracurriculars. And I love that you stress that, because our kids can't just be doing all the things they struggle with all the time. Right. They have to be exploring, what am I good at? Not what am I really awful at, and what do I have to keep on working at? Yes. And so, I can't tell you the number of extracurriculars we did for our kids just to find, something that clicked. But but it was worth the effort, because they gained a lot of self-confidence in doing those. So thank you for mentioning those, definitely. Yes. Perfect. Yeah, and we had one response to Serena, so she read it.
Yes. Yeah, play dates are a great way as well. Just find other homeschoolers if you can, and just put a shout out that you're heading to the park or wherever.
Exactly. Yeah, there's so many Facebook groups, like just you put a homeschool in your community name and something will come up on Facebook. Yes. So we got connected when we moved to Texas, and how we're gonna get connected when we move in 20 days. Right. So yeah, that's a good point. There's homeschoolers everywhere. And and I did want to say something when you were talking about, the different homeschool programs. Don't get into this fear factor too about accredited schools. Yes. Because that a lot of parents say, well, I need an accredited program. Right. By your state law, you do not. Yes. So make sure to check with, an organization that knows your state laws, and definitely find out from them what you have to be teaching and what you do not, and all of that. Because
absolutely, perfect point. I get an awful lot of questions, parents requesting curriculum. Well, I want it to be accredited. I'm like, no, you don't. It means nothing to us. It means absolutely nothing to us. I think there's probably 1 or 2 states that if you're transferring back into public school,
yes,
that may
Texas
require
is one of those. In high school, you have to have an accredited program. So I always tell parents, be very careful if you're going back and planning on going back into the public school with high school credits. Otherwise, it really doesn't matter.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Yes.
So.
Good.
Yeah, well, we've got about 10 minutes, and I know there's questions we still haven't even got to yet. So I thought I would just kind of let you say what you think is most important to still say that we haven't covered yet. I know we have creating healthy family dynamics. What can we do if I need more help? And I know you even had some resources. So what would be your top things?
You know, I think I would just emphasize that having a special needs child can, it uses up a lot of your energy. As a parent, it uses up a lot of your energy as trying to teach them. And I know in my own family, and I'm gonna use my family as an example, is that the other kids in the family will begin to feel neglected if your entire focus is on that special needs child. And sometimes, you know, as you mentioned, it is a season in life. There's too many doctor's appointments. There's too many therapy appointments. And it is just the season. But it's really important to kind of carve out time for the other family members and to make sure they know that they are just as important and to spend the time with them as well, because there does come a point where they can become resentful and angry and have to work through those feelings as well. And I think that's just kind of a normal process in the family dynamics, but at the same time, you want to make sure that you're addressing those and not just saying that, oh, well, John has therapy again today, I can't spend, you know, any time with you. You know, maybe dad can take John to therapy and you can spend time with the other child, or figure out what that schedule looks like so that, you know, you're still giving of yourself to the other family members and you know, your spouse or your partner, whoever that is. You know, on the marriage end, I can tell you it is an absolute struggle some days where you are just not connecting. And sometimes it's just because of the schedules. You know, as I said, you're at the doctor's all day, you're exhausted, then you have to cook dinner, and then you have to correct the 12 math papers that you didn't get to because you had appointments the day before. So to connect with your partner is just sometimes so difficult, and it's really, really important that you keep those healthy lines of communication open, and that you have quiet time alone with your spouse too, whether it's date night or what, you know, whether you're closing the family room door and watching a movie and eating popcorn and the kids are off, you know, watching their own movie or whatever it is. Make sure you're making time for everyone in your family, including yourself. So
yeah, and it could be so simple. I shared, we had a marriage video that we did a couple weeks ago, and I said, you know, my husband and I just go for a walk. The dog has to go for a walk anyways, so we have a trail across the street. We walk the dog, and that's when we talk. The kids aren't around, they can't hear what we're talking about, and it's our time together. It's really that simple. Or even just having a cup of coffee after dinner when all the kids leave the table. You know, we've just dedicated that little bit of time, and so it doesn't have to be extravagant. But but you make those times, you know, it's like last night I told my daughter, what do you want to do tonight? This is your night. You know, you just have to make them each have their own individual time.
Yes. My dogs are barking again. I apologize. I can hear them. I'm not sure, but they're barking a lot. So, yeah. So does anyone have any questions that I can answer for you at all?
We've got about 7 more minutes, and so had some great ones so far.
Yes, we've had great ones. Really good questions.
Yeah, it's, you know, it is that time of year, and you know, I would even say that, you know, even if you have a child that is close to the end, you know, in high school, it's still not too late to start. Right. That there is always, you're always going to make more headway with your child in their learning. If this is where you really feel like that things aren't working,
Yes.
it's definitely worth the try. And, try some things. You've got a couple weeks still this summer. I know I've talked to quite a few parents who said that, we're just trying it out. Well, good.
Yes.
It's best to get a good idea of what works while you aren't stressed about, I'm making this decision for the year. Well, you're not really. I mean.
Right. It really is one day at a time. It's a week at a time, a month at a time, a year at a time. And I think I would say to everybody too is that, your first year, whether you have a special needs child or not, is going to be a bit of chaos, and it's going to be a bit of trying to figure out what works. There's a couple honeymoon periods. Usually I think the first 3 months kind of go okay because everybody's like, oh, we're homeschooling now, we're going to get this done. and then it doesn't go so well. The kids start rebelling and they're like, what are we doing? And then it happens again around 6 months, and then around a year they're like, we want to go back to public school, we're done with this. We've had it. It's time to leave. And it really isn't. They're just kind of the milestones that, like I said, working through the honeymoon phases of homeschooling.
So when do you think you really hit your groove, that your kids just kind of knew that this is what we were doing, and it just, because I remember my kids just all of a sudden grabbed their books and just said, okay, this is how we do school.
I honestly think it was going into our 3rd year.
Yeah, that's where I was thinking too.
Yeah, it was about year 3, which I think really shocks people, because I think they, like I said, 6 months in, they're like, oh, no, we should be in a groove now. It's been 6 months. It really was probably a good 3 years before my kids realized, oh, she's kind of serious about this now. We're really not going back to public school, and where they would get into the routine, and we had kind of figured out like what our day looked like and what worked best, and where we were going to keep everything and where their assignments were going to be and all of that kind of stuff. And once they got into their routine, those things settled out, and we figured all those little pieces out. But yeah, it was a while. I think it's longer than people think it's going to be.
Right.
So
I think that's, it's a good point to bring up, because we do think that, oh, I'm going to do this thing and we're just going to, sail on through. But, and also you realize as a teacher, and you had pointed this out earlier, what works for you. You're learning as much about yourself as you are about your child. And it's going to take a while too. I bought so many curriculums for my child and realized I couldn't teach them.
Yes.
And then went, well, I think we got to have another workaround for this one. But eventually you figure out, what you're comfortable with. It's like today I was looking for an Algebra 2 book for my daughter, and somebody pulled one off a shelf, and I looked through it. I'm like, yep, that'll work.
That'll work. Yeah.
We'll take it. It's free.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, as you get into it, around year 3, I think you become a little more a little more in tune with what's out there as far as curriculum, and you start to pick things up easier and able to flip through them and go, this is not going to work on any level for me whatsoever.
Exactly.
This one's like, I like some of this, but not so much that kind of stuff. We may need to supplement with this book over here. So all of that stuff starts to come, as you gain exposure to it as a parent and as you start using things. But absolutely. I think we spent a lot of money our first couple years on curriculum. Trying to figure out because you think you need everything as well.
I know. So yes.
It's a ton of money, but.
Right. My recommendation is go to the library a lot.
Yes.
Use your librarian.
Yes. Or use, if you can go to curriculum fairs or those types of things, where you can actually look through the books and see what they're like before you purchase them, is always a good idea to check them out. And a lot of the publishers now have samples that you can download so you can see what's inside of them. And figure it out from that piece. So easy. Yeah. Yeah. And Amy just wrote it. I like curriculum that is easy to use and easy to modify, accommodate. I'm right there with you, Amy. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's got to be not only easy for my child to figure out, but for me to be able to teach as well.
I don't need to take a class to teach my child. I don't have time. That would be a wonderful thing, but it's so nice that now even some of the curriculum that long ago people needed to take a class for has been written in a way that we don't have to take classes to teach.
Absolutely. They've really, really come a long way with curriculum for homeschoolers.
Huge. Yeah. I used to go to curriculum fairs and homeschool conventions, and I come home crying.
Yeah. Oh no.
Nothing.
Yes.
And so parents, these days, you got it good.
Yes. We really do. Yeah. And if you can get the teacher's manuals that go with them, that's always helpful as well for a lot of the areas. For me, that was teaching Shakespeare, which was always a struggle. So I'm always grateful for the teacher's manual and the interpretation of that and what that looks like. So
I think my interpretation would be very different.
Yes.
Not accurate either.
Exactly. So we want to make sure we're teaching them the most accepted interpretation of that.
Right, exactly.
It's funny. Very funny. So,
Beverly, your website is beverlyburgess.com. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
So make sure you do definitely check out Beverly's resources. And if you need somebody that can hold your hand and walk you through this, that is what she does. So, so definitely get in contact with her. And so that she can help you with her services. And just thank you for your time so much, Beverly.
Oh, thank you. This was great fun.
Yeah,
a lot of
definitely. And so I just want to let our viewers know that that this broadcast in part is sponsored by the Learning Disabilities Foundation of America. We're thankful for their grant that helps support this broadcast. And it's run by SPED Homeschool, and you can find us at spedhomeschool.com. And I'm losing my voice. Anyways, but yes, you can find us on our website or on Facebook. And we just thank you. Next week, our guest, we're going to be starting a 2-part series with Dr. Jan Bedell, who is a neurodevelopmentalist. And we're going to be talking about how to approach dyslexia and dysgraphia. For the neurodevelopmental approach. And then the next week, we're going to talk to her about ADHD and ADD. And so that's exciting. So that's what's coming up on our broadcast. So we look forward to seeing you next week. But let's keep the conversation going on our Facebook page and also in the SPED Homeschool support group. We'll see you then. And goodbye for now.
Take care.